this is a book that isn't specifically about learning differences, but is a great book if for anybody who works with or knows a young person who seems to have challenges with their self-esteem. It's just general strategies, but they're all great. Here's the definition from this book. They use the term real self-esteem, but I think it's more or less synonymous with healthy self-esteem. From my understanding, the key to breaking free from low self-esteem is to move beyond self-focus. Real self-esteem isn't about believing we are special or wonderful. Real self-esteem means being able to let go of the question, am I good enough? Uh, Personally, a definition that makes sense to me is a healthy self-esteem is not viewing oneself as better or worse than others, simply different. Different strengths, different challenges, different paths leading up to today, different paths moving forward, neither better or worse. And the importance of this, why this topic is so important, and I completely agree with this viewpoint. In his presentation, Dr. Olivardia says the following. He says, anything else that we try to work on with a student who has, in the case of his presentation, dyslexia, but I think it branches out to the other learning differences, is self-esteem. Anything else that we'd like to work on will not be as helpful unless self-esteem is successfully targeted first. And the way he explains it is, again, one that I completely agree with. It's very difficult to teach the skills, the competencies, if the student doesn't have a belief that they are capable of learning the skills and competencies. And it's very observable and noticeable when that self-esteem is already very low. And this is the key area to address before anything else. Of course, while addressing it, you work on the skills and competencies, but this is a critical area to work on if it appears to have been um, negatively affected over the years through the experiences of the child with a learning difference. Um, Other reasons why this is extremely important, Dr. Olivardia in his presentation talks about this, but so does the literature. The connection with the signs of a low self-esteem, the development of a low self-esteem, and what that can lead to if not successfully addressed. And mood disorders can have a strong link with a low self-esteem to begin with, anxiety disorders as well. And there's very, very strong links or comorbidity that exists between different learning differences and mood disorders, anxiety disorders. This is just some statistics from specific books, but if you looked at different studies, there are many different studies who have looked at the links. And so a low self-esteem is associated with being a risk factor for mental health disorders, the comorbidity of ADHD, LD stands for learning disabilities, and the autism spectrum disorder with mental health disorders is high. More than 40% of men and 50% of women with ADD. This is from the book Power of Different, which is a great book that goes more into the neuroscience of learning differences. More than 40% of men and 50% of women with ADD have multiple anxiety disorders. Approximately a third of children with ADD also have an anxiety disorder. And here's a graph that shows other statistics, which are quite, I'd say, alarming if it's the first time seeing this. And this one. So again, the slides will be shared with everyone, I think, for the sake of time. I can't go over each single point, but each of these images are attached to a link. So once the slides are shared with you, you can open the actual link and look at additional details. And this is for on the autism spectrum, any sort of comorbidities, which are very strong. And yeah, so there's many reasons to also just beyond the actual effect that the low self-esteem has on the development of skills and competencies, but beyond that as well, if not properly addressed, the additional risks associated with that. Yeah, so for self-esteem and diverse learners, the existence of low self-esteem in many students with learning differences and the immediate short-term and long-term risk factors associated with this is clear. So the big questions are the following. Um, this is for educators, but I think that it also translates to whatever relationship you have with the individual with the learning difference, the child with the learning differences. How can we start from the very beginning when we work with a diverse learner to help them develop a healthy self-esteem? And if we encounter, this is more for the educators, of course, not the parents, but if we encounter a student with a learning difference later in their life and we notice potential signs of a low self-esteem, how do we begin to address this? So in my own personal practice and experience now over the years, it's something that I see all the time. The student's self-esteem has taken such a big hit over the years that they feel incapable of learning uh, whatever's being learned in the classroom, but also feeling capable of potentially having value to others. One of the classic sort of social emotional learning activities that's done is strengths and challenges questionnaires. And very often, when I've done this activity, the strengths column can be very just almost completely blank, sometimes completely blank, but almost completely blank. And the question is, okay, so, what do you think are your strengths? And very often it's been the case where the student doesn't believe they have strengths. It's not always the case, but it's something that I've seen a lot over the years. And this is obviously an area that needs to be addressed first. When this happens, to talk about, okay, let's actually sit down and let's think about this. What are things that you know that you're good at, that you do well, and start to build that from there. But these signs are very clear and evident over the years when I've worked with the students that I've worked with in my own teaching. So following this, so if we know about the low self-esteem and the concerns we have, and the potential resulting effects of this, what can we do? So in the presentation, I focus on self-awareness, belonging and contribution, and competency as three critical areas to think about. So I'll go through each one by one, and then go from there. So the first one's about fostering self-awareness. So this is really important to begin with. As the first key area to think about when developing a healthy self-esteem for a child with learning differences. Um, to begin with is asking myself as the adult that works with the student with a learning difference is actually how much do I know? How much do I know about learning differences? That's a very good place to start. I was looking at who's attending this presentation, and I think of course. I think that everyone here already has a very good understanding of learning differences, but in general, this is a very good place to start. So it begins with fostering my own self-awareness, and ask myself questions such as, what do I actually know about what I know regarding the facts of what learning disabilities are? What's the difference between the terms learning disability, learning disorder, and learning differences? And which one do I use? And am I using perhaps the term in the right way, depending on the right context? Am I familiar with the term neurodiversity? Am I also familiar with the neuroscience of ADHD, learning disabilities, and the autism spectrum disorder? Am I also familiar with common strengths of ADHD, learning disabilities, and the autism spectrum disorder? So it was actually at this point where I wanted to ask everyone sort of to share a little bit about what they know regarding some of these terms. So one way I can do it is if I stop sharing, that allows me to ask the group, but I don't know if that means that uh, Junko-san, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so I can ask the group now, but I think since I don't know if everyone is appearing on your recording or what what do you see on your screen?
Just your face.
Just my face. Okay,
Yeah.
that's perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna ask everyone questions now, and then I'll share some of the responses. When you share your response, can you please um, uh, just message it to me, not to the entire group. So the first question is, how would you define the word neurodiversity? And if you can write a reply to that question. Okay, so I don't know if everyone can see it in the chat, but if you can write your response in the chat. So that was question one. Okay. Um, okay, I see some responses. Okay. Okay, I see a couple responses. Okay. All right, so I'll start reading some of the definitions that I'm receiving. Neurodiversity, that's a tough one. Someone who is not neurotypical, which is supposedly the typical or dominant neurotype. ND can be ADHD, learning disabilities, autism spectrum disorder. Um, okay, I see a response in the group, which is okay as well. People's brains and nervous systems develop and function in different ways at separate times. That which is not neurotypical, but then how is that defined? Okay. People's brains have different ways of processing and creating information. So yeah, there's been it's a term that so now I'll just share. It's a term that's kind of evolved over the years. It was first coined in the 90s, early 1990s. And since then it's gone through some evolution. I think now one of the most common definitions would be the fact that everyone's brain is different, and we have to have that understanding with every individual that we meet, that everyone has different neurological differences, brain differences, and as a result of that, right, people have their strengths, their unique strengths, and their unique challenges, and every individual should be understood in that way, with an approach of understanding what neurodiversity is. So yeah, unique challenges and unique strengths, but that's every single individual we meet. So that's a common definition that would appear now. I'll go back to my slides. Um, and let me share my screen again. Okay. And thank you for sharing your responses. So now I'm back to my screen. So neurodiversity, here's a image, encapsulates, almost every type of brain difference. But again, I think an emphasis here is that it's every single individual is diversity includes everyone. And that it has to be understood that everyone has their own unique difference. So I think that's really important in understanding of the term neurodiversity. It doesn't make someone better or worse than other people, but there are simply these differences, and there's a neurological explanation for it in every case. And so the next thing I wanted to ask everyone is, I'll unshare again. The next question is, what are some things you know about the neuroscience of ADHD? So I'm going to ask this to the whole group. What are some things you know about the neuroscience of ADHD? So same thing that we just did, if you could please write a response to me as a private message. But I think actually, if you if you write it to the group, that's okay too. If you want your response to be shared with everyone, with your name appearing. And I think in the video, recorded video won't appear. So that's the next question. What are some things you know about the neuroscience of ADHD? So I'm seeing some responses here. Delayed maturation of the prefrontal cortex. Okay, yeah, that's the one of the neurological pieces of information that appears a lot. Executive functioning disorder. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the names that some ADHD experts and specialists were saying the name should be changed to an executive functioning delay disorder. And that's because that's what's greatly affected. I have two definitions. Thank you. Delayed maturation of the prefrontal cortex. So that comes up later in one of my slides. But yeah, there's this 2 to 3 year delay in individuals with ADHD of the development of the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with the executive functioning skills. Um, I'll just give a moment more if anyone else has something to add. So yeah, that's great. Oh, I'll share one more here. Neurotransmitter variation, that's right. So dopamine is one of the neurotransmitters that's affected in individuals with ADHD. Again, I want to say again, I'm not an expert, and I know that with every type of learning difference, every individual you meet is different from the next individual you meet with that learning difference. However, there seems to be some commonalities, and I'm sharing those commonalities. But one of the things I want to emphasize is to look at every single individual as an individual. But if there is a diagnosis like ADHD, there appears to be these commonalities that are worth knowing. So the neurotransmitter dopamine is affected in ADHD. The research shows, and that's why there's this naturally lower level occurring of dopamine, which results in this higher risk taking, the higher need for stimulation due to that lower level of dopamine, which is really interesting. Uh, Being diagnosed when I was 13, I didn't know about any of this until I was an adult, but it helped me have an understanding of the neurological basis, perhaps, for explaining some of the challenges I might see in myself, especially when I was younger. But since we know that, again, if we're talking about the brain fully develops around the age of 25. And the last part of the brain to develop is this prefrontal cortex, which is associated with the executive functioning skills. And in ADHD, for example, there's about a 2 to 3 year delay there. But of course, it's not something where you wake up on your 25th birthday, 27th, 28th birthday, and it's everything is different, something that slowly happens. And I wanted to say at some point, from my own experience, that time, it's good to measure the progress in months and in years, more so than day to day, because time does, in my experience as well, time slows down as you get older. The things that were always hard sometimes just get slowly more and more possible. As of course, everyone as they get older naturally gets better at many things that were difficult at when we were in school. But uh, in my case, I'd say for sure. That it was something that where time slowed down. But it took time. Exactly like you said, someone shared here, some studies show that brains mature between 25 to 30 years old for NT, I believe it's standing for neurotypical brains. And so for ADHD brains, that could be 38 to 40 years old. Yeah. So there's another example, right? That's outside of perhaps what I was saying. So thank you everyone for sharing. I just saw one more. Creativity can be a strength, but difficulties with catecholamines, dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. Brains are a bit smaller and different. Yeah, that's something that's appeared. The overall, yeah, size differences and issues with maturity and executive functioning skills. So thank you for sharing that. I'll get into the next question. You can probably guess the next one's coming, but what are some things you know about the neuroscience? I'm going to have this one asking about uh, dyslexia. Dyslexia is the most common learning disability. I'm going to write learning disabilities and sorry, I'm about to post it. And I'm putting dyslexia in brackets, not because it is all of the learning disabilities, but it's the most common one that appears. And so what's some things you know about the neuroscience of learning disabilities? And I know there's some people attending tonight that know a lot about dyslexia specifically through their own practice. So can you share anything that you know about the neuroscience of learning disabilities, dyslexia? Um, but if you would like to talk about what you know about the neuroscience of dyscalculia, dysgraphia, please do so as well. I'll also like to mention that you might have noticed that I'm focusing mainly on ADHD, learning disabilities, and the autism spectrum disorder because those are the developmental disabilities that I've had the most experience with working over the years. But I'm of course the developmental disabilities. I think there's 13 in total, and there's much more than what I'm focusing on. But those are the ones that I'm the most familiar with. Um, and so sorry if it sounds like I'm leaving. I'm not talking about all the developmental disabilities, but I'm mainly focusing on those three developmental disabilities today. So I see some responses. I see one here. How the brain processes information. Yeah, yep, processes information. That's right. Um, let's see if anyone else has written something here. I know there's some reading specialists attending tonight, so uh, maybe I need to give it a bit more time. Okay. So yeah, so I have one response of our how the brain processes information. So yeah, so there's a lot of research that exists on the brain of an individual with dyslexia, including what specific parts of the brain seem to have lower activation. And so in the case of the parts of the brain that are most associated with the development of reading and writing, and this is specifically phonetic processing, those parts of the brain appear to be affected. However, at the same time, and this going back to ADHD as well, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. This also, due to some of these neurological differences, also these incredible strengths appear as well. There was an expression used, again, a commonality, but in individuals with dyslexia that you see a lot of individuals with dyslexia are able to see the forest from the trees. So there appears to be this sort of larger, more broader. See, this is where I'm not an expert, but the connections that exist between different parts of the brain, there seems to be a different type of communication happening that results in a lot of creative, entrepreneurial thinking. And I'm forgetting all the details now, but it's something that I'd like everyone, if you have time, to look into. Also, how the strengths also have a neurological explanation for them. These common strengths in dyslexia. And I have a definition here. Oh, sorry, something someone added here. Issue with phonological processing and or possibly rapid access naming, making it difficult to read, but also influencing other academic areas such as learning math facts. Comes with amazing, thank you for the person writing this, comes with amazing strengths, which is why so many can become CEOs. Has no connections to IQ, but comes with very lucrative skills. That's brilliant. Thank you for the person who wrote that. Yeah, exactly. Again, the no connection to IQ. So, when we're talking about dyslexia, for example, ADHD, they have nothing to do with intelligence. They're performance-based deficits associated with ADHD and learning disabilities, but not it has nothing to do with intelligence. And so that's really thank you for sharing that there. Next question is. What are here? I'm just going to copy paste this one. What are some things you know about the neuroscience of um, ASD, the autism spectrum disorder? Autism spectrum disorder. And this is probably the most where it can be more because there really is a wide range. I mean, it's the name itself, the autism spectrum. But if you know anything about the neuroscience of the autism spectrum disorder, please share in a response. I see there's uh, okay, I see. I don't know if that's a response to the one before. And so the goal here, by the way, is again, these questions, it's going back to this building up of the self-awareness. Um, there's countless amounts of research and evidence for these neurological differences, and they're really important to be aware of when considering each of these ADHD, learning disabilities, the autism spectrum disorder. Um, Here I see a comment. ASD level 1 is highly genetic. Sometimes parents do not know that they may have ASD when their child is first diagnosed. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the genetic side of it. There seems to be, yeah, strong genetic links, also with learning disabilities, also with ADHD, that either there's been a diagnosis in the in a family member or the parent, for example, but they might not, yeah, there might have been diagnosis or no diagnosis. They might not have been aware, but then they suddenly think about it. They're like, oh, I actually had, for example, if dyslexia, I had challenges with reading and writing when I was in school. So that's really interesting as well. I didn't see a lot of comments regarding the neuroscience of the autism spectrum disorder, but there's some really interesting literature there as well. To counter it to dyslexia, there's a comment that a lot of individuals on the autism spectrum appear to be able to have this strength of being able to tell the trees from the forest. So there seems to be a hyperconnectivity in certain clusters of the brain, which results in this incredible ability to notice details in well, depending on the different contexts, but this ability to be very detail oriented and focusing in on a very sharp detail of something. And there's neurological evidence that of that happening in certain brain scans, this hyperconnectivity. Um, a comment here about I think this is autism spectrum in general, but folks with ASD often struggle with sensory issues, language development, and social issues. Flexibility can be an issue. ASD has lots of strengths in areas such as music, science, etc. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna go back to the slides and just let's see what the next question is. Okay, I'm gonna go back to sharing my slides. And thank you everyone for sharing what you know about these questions. And I'll go back to my slides. Uh, so, um, so there's great videos. I mean, this one I have the link to when you have the slides, where it's just a very short 2-minute video that goes into some of these commonalities based off neuroscience literature and research regarding ADHD. Same, I share one on dyslexia that you can take a look at later, and the autism spectrum disorder as well. And though, you know, these videos are really interesting and to get into this because it helps to have an understanding of also the neuroscience behind each of these, yeah, ADHD, learning disabilities, and the autism spectrum disorder. So um, now I want to talk a little bit about strengths. So I'm going to stop sharing again. And I'm going to ask the following question to everybody. What are some strengths that you know are associated with ADHD? So I'm going to ask that to the group. What are some strengths that you know are associated with ADHD? So, from your own experience and what you know, maybe in an individual that you know that you've noticed, wow, they're really strong in this area, I've noticed. And then I'm going to share a long list that exists, but I'm seeing here creativity, ability to hyper focus, boundless energy. Yeah, those are very common ones that appear. Super focus, yeah. Very fast recollection of information. Yeah, that comes up a lot. Um, Curious, brave, courageous, honest. Yeah, there's a lot. Um, I'll Generous. Yeah. Okay. And I'm gonna ask the next one. And you can share if you're talking still, you need a time to talk about ADHD. And I'm gonna ask the next one, learning disabilities, such as dyslexia. Common strengths that you know are associated. See another one here, a delicate sense for music and sound. I think that was for ADHD. Okay, so the next one was what are strengths you know are associated with learning disabilities, dyslexia. Dyslexia, visual strengths, creativity, big picture thinking, 3D, yeah, the 3D manipulation of 3D objects. Um, yeah, okay. Dyslexia. Thank you for specifying you're talking about dyslexia. And then I'll ask one more with the autism spectrum. What are strengths you know are associated or common strengths associated with individuals on the autism spectrum? And here, strong memory. Yeah, that can appear as a strength, definitely. Strong memory. Honesty, genuine people, detail oriented, can have a deep spike of expertise in area of interest. Yeah. Honesty, genuine people, detail oriented. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for sharing. So I'll just go over a list here that appears. This is the Mentimeter. And this is from, I believe, yeah, okay, this is from the website dyslexicadvantage.org, which I go over a bunch of different books at the end of this presentation. But Dyslexic Advantage is also a book that was written at least over a decade ago that talks a lot about these common strengths that you see in individuals who have a diagnosis of dyslexia. And they talk about something called MIND strengths. And each one has its own sort of, so there's material reasoning strengths, interconnected reasoning strengths, narrative reasoning strengths, dynamic reasoning strengths. And I guess this image, which is nice, talks about careers that are associated with those different strengths. Architects is listed here. There's some incredible statistics about the number of successful architects who either have a diagnosis of dyslexia or share about challenges they had when they were with reading and writing when they were in school. A lot of artists as well, and a lot of entrepreneurs. I think there are some very Richard Branson, for example, talks a lot about his experience as an individual with dyslexia, and more so. I think what's his name, the chef? Oh my God, Jamie Oliver. Jamie Oliver is another individual who talks a lot about. He's very entrepreneurial. I don't know so much about the work they've done and the good or not so good, but just mentioning some names that are coming to mind. And yeah, so that there's loads. So when you have these slides later, you can click on the images and this it pulls up this link if you're interested in dyslexia, for example. Attitude is a great website that talks a lot about ADHD and learning disabilities, and has a long list here of the strengths that can be commonly seen in individuals with ADHD. Several of them were mentioned in the chat. There's a very interesting sort of uh, I don't know what to call this, but a lot of the terms that we might use negatively um, when considering individuals with ADHD actually can be flip to their positive, and they would be a very positive thing. I think ADHD, individuals with ADHD, there was an expression used that they're hunters in a farmer's world. And so a lot of the strengths associated with ADHD would have been so valuable at the time we were hunters. But moving away from that, the flip sides, right? So hyperactive, restless can be flipped to energetic, intrusive, flipped to eager, can't stay on point, sees connections others don't, and so on and so on. And so, ah, why did I not? Okay, so I don't know why the slide for the autism spectrum disorder is in here, but of course, you just search strengths, common strengths associated with the autism spectrum disorder, and there'll be loads of links and articles and videos and websites talking about it. So yeah, so I'm gonna move on to the next slide and probably have to move quite fast now. Classic, but yeah. So one of the questions associated with this. So to begin with, one of the first areas, how much do I know about whatever it is, whatever the if they're whatever the developmental disability is, and as a result of that, what is the basis of my knowledge? And and as a result of that, right? So this is more kind of asking, for educators, but the as a result of that, what are my expectations of this learner? Do I have high expectations? And my expectations themselves, what foundation are they built on? I think we were talking earlier. Someone mentioned in the chat that, yeah, for example, if we're talking about ADHD or dyslexia, for example, have nothing to do with intelligence and our performance-based deficits, right? And so as a result of that, right, what are my actual expectations of what this individual can achieve, and what are those built on? This is a great book that talks about, it was published recently, so takes into account all the new challenges that we see with young people, but what's important when we work with young people to help them stay and be motivated. But it talks a lot about in this book that the thesis is basically we always need to have the high expectations but high support. And I think that goes for any individual that we know and work with, that we always have those high expectations, but there's also the high support. And particularly in learning differences, we know that there are the challenges that exist, of course, and that there's support for those challenges based off our knowledge and understanding, but always those high expectations that, of course, every individual that we know with the learning differences very capable of achieving incredible things in their life. But we need to have a strong foundation of knowledge of who they are, the challenges they have, and the strengths and the neurological background too. There's something interesting called the self-fulfilling prophecy, and there's the other, it's termed the Pygmalion effect, which essentially is, as a result of our expectations, right? If we have high expectations, maybe we spend more time, if we're a teacher, for example, with that student, and as a result of our more time with that student, they develop at a stronger and better rate. And that also reinforces our expectations, our high expectations. The flip side of that is if we start with low expectations, perhaps we spend less time with that student with what they need. And as a result of that, they don't develop as much as they're capable of developing. And that reinforces our low expectations. And then the cycle continues. So there has to be this start, which is based off a strong foundation of knowledge and the high expectations. This is more for the educators here, but just in general, right? If the student does have an evaluation and diagnosis, it's quite clear from all the literature and research that and now we're talking again, going back, this is about self-esteem, fostering a healthy self-esteem. It's very, very important that the student knows the details of their evaluation and the diagnosis. And if there is an evaluation that someone has sat down and talked about the evaluation to the student, and they know that they have a diagnosis, and they know what that diagnosis actually is and what it means, the facts. I had a student once a long time ago who received a diagnosis for ADHD and came to school, head down, looked off, usually very enthusiastic. Um, and the student was down, and they said, I touched base. I checked in and said, I noticed your head was down earlier. What's up? And is everything all right? And the student said, no, I have a disease. I found out yesterday. I said, oh, do you have a disease? Then you probably you shouldn't be in school right now if you're feeling sick and you feel like you might. And he said, no, 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 I have a disease. It's ADHD. And once I heard that, I said, okay, what do you mean by that? And it was very clear to me very quickly. He had just been told, the student had just been told that simply that they have ADHD, a diagnosis of ADHD, but not much more was said beyond that. So their understanding of it was a very shallow understanding, a very, I guess not correct understanding of what it actually is. And that's of course a problem at that point, right? And so I had to work with the parents, ask, is it okay if I speak to the student about what I understand about what it is, and we look at what the facts are. I had to ask the parent first if that was okay. But of course, it's the evaluator, the one who conducted the evaluation, of course, who should also sit down and explain what it is to the parents, the details, and also to ensure that the student has an understanding as well. Dr. Olivardia in his presentation talks about an IPP, which is an ignorance prevention plan. And that's something once the student knows if they have a diagnosis, what it is, and how they can, explain what it is to somebody and advocate for themselves. And I think that's a great way to remember it, an IPP. because he makes the point that if they don't know what it is, someone else will tell them for them, and that person might not have a correct understanding of what it actually is. Early intervention is critical. Early intervention for anyone who's working with very young individuals is critical, that as early as possible. I think with self-esteem, right, it starts to develop even a lower self-esteem is even at a higher risk once you get to around 7 to 11 years old, and after 11, when there starts to be this comparing to others. But of course, if there's a very good foundation of skills and understanding at an early age, as early as possible, that helps a lot with getting to those stages later on when there starts to be this sort of feeling of how am I compared to others. A good understanding of oneself results in that healthy self-esteem where one isn't comparing oneself to others, but also, one is actually receiving support for the challenging areas as early as possible. And so it's clear a student knowing and understanding their possible diagnosis is critical. A school has a role in this as well. They can work together with the parents to communicate any challenges that are being seen, and what is the evidence for those challenges. And as a result, if there is possibly something going on beyond just the challenges, and that's important too. And again, these are just general things, but the student can be given many opportunities to consider their strengths and challenges, be provided opportunities for activities connected to their strengths. Learning about the brain is extremely powerful, just in a general way, explaining, this is how the brain works, different parts of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex, what that part of the brain is associated with, um, and um, and yeah, that's a lot of fun to learn about as well for many individuals. Learning about topics like neurodiversity, learning about topics like executive functioning skills can be very helpful. Learning about different types of careers. Multiple intelligences is a theory. Some believe that it's not a valid theory, but I think just as a general piece of knowledge, it can be very empowering to know that there's a theory, that there are these different types of intelligences. Learning about unique, successful people, or talking about your own self if you know your own challenges that you've had. And I think it's important that talking about those challenges is helpful, but also talking specifically how you were able to deal successfully with challenges if you've had challenges that you like to bring up, and lots of opportunities for authentic experiences. There are great books that, talk about different individuals, successful individuals with learning differences. There's a book, this Whole Brain Child book, Dr. Dan Siegel talks about how you can talk about the brain and teach about the brain to a younger person. These are books as well, great books that talk about successful individuals with learning differences. And self-awareness also helps a lot with self-advocacy, which we know is extremely important um, for one's ability to be successful in challenging environments, to advocate for one's challenges. But that starts with being aware of what one's challenges are. Um, and yeah, so I guess I have 5 minutes left, which is a real shame because it's going to make it difficult to finish some parts of this. But I'll try to go through this part quickly, and if it's okay at 8, those who have questions can stay and ask questions. And I'll try to get through the rest of the content of these slides as fast as I can. Uh, Maslow's pyramid of needs, and this is the next part, which is important for self-esteem, fostering belonging, and contribution. Talks a lot about this area needing to be targeted before being able to develop this healthy esteem. And I think everyone is familiar or seen this pyramid, but every single part at the basis of this pyramid needs to be addressed to even get to that point of developing a healthy self-esteem. But this belonging is extremely important. One of the ways educators can do that, but in general, is always making sure the expectations are extremely clear to the individual with the learning difference, and that once the expectations are clear, if the child has followed the expectations, that it's narrated. Oh, I noticed that this expectation is being done, right? Not like a big deal is being made out of it, but simply it's noticed. Is very helpful for this feeling of belonging, that I know what the right thing is to do. It's been written clearly, it's visually available, and it's noticed, like I'm somebody who's doing the right thing. It can be a small thing, but a huge thing. Providing opportunities for roles and responsibilities. When I was in middle school, my physics teacher. Physics was one of my worst subjects, but it was the subject that I looked one of the most forward to going to because the teacher did this thing where she would give me empty envelopes. I didn't know they were empty at the time, and would send me to the office, the school office, with empty envelopes. I thought they had something in them, simply to get my body moving and to make me feel like I was helping in some way to the community, and that helped a lot with my self-esteem and made me feel like I belong. It's something that's a very simple strategy. I liked from this book the phrasing of we should always give roles and responsibilities not just to those who earn them, but also to those, of course, to those who need them. A lot of students who have this low self-esteem would be able to thrive with this feeling of responsibility being given to them to help with something. Provide opportunities that they can teach something that they're good at to other people. Roles like mentoring can be really helpful for an individual learning difference who seems to have a low self-esteem, teaching something to a younger person, right? Providing a mentorship sort of role. Uh, Being in that person's life in a way, being interested about what they're interested in. Stanley Greenspan is a famous doctor he's the one who actually, but anyways, a doctor who had this DIR approach, which emphasizes this connection that needs to be built before anything else, so that the child feels that the people in their life has a real interest in what they're interested in. And Dr. Dan Siegel, the one I mentioned before, is big on this idea of connection is the start to building all these things like a healthy self-esteem, for example, and this individual's belief in their abilities to be a successful individual. I have a website that I created, and it's connected to this idea that opportunities are not always available in school. So to try and find opportunities outside of school, it can be difficult in Tokyo to find some opportunities, but I've tried to accumulate as many as I can, and I shared a link here that I'll add more to, that people can take a look at if you're interested, like what are some available opportunities that provide English support if English is the strongest language and there's that's the most ideal situation. And fostering competency, well, I guess that's it, but it's really important. I think the main point I want to make is that executive functioning skills is a critical area to try and work on building for individuals, for children with learning differences. There's some great models and books that talk about building these executive function skills. Smart but Scattered is a great series. This Dr. Ross Green is someone who's written a lot about developing these skills through a specific communication approach that I think is great and very effective. Seeing My Time program is a time management program that's very effective. Google Calendar is a great tool. Belly breathing and mindfulness can be great skills to build up if it's possible, because that's a skill that can be difficult for a lot of individuals, for example, ADHD, and it's a very powerful and important skill to develop. Um, okay, I guess AI will have to be a presentation for another time. I don't want to take up everyone's evening, so I'll try to develop that part better and present it another time. So I'll stop there for today. I
Okay,
guess
thank
I'm
you, Mr.
rusty.
JP.
Time
Mr.
management.
JP, for such informative presentation. And we are sorry for run over the schedule. We understand if you need to leave, we'll send you the YouTube link later so you can catch up. And for people who can stay a little bit longer, Mr. JP will answer your questions. So
Yeah.
please type your question in a chat box and send it to him as privately. Then he'll select a few questions to respond to.
Yeah. And just to show everyone before any questions, these slides will be shared with you, but the last slides of this presentation have all of the books that over the years have helped with informing information in the slides. Some of them are Japanese books that I've been more able to understand recently. There's a lot written in Japanese, I think, about these topics. So for anyone who has Japanese as their stronger language, but most of these are in English and are very interesting for further kind of reading about specific topics. So once you have the slides, please know that at the very bottom, you'll see a lot of book references, but also near the very bottom, hold on. some links as well to videos that help this presentation, inform this presentation, and some other interesting links that uh, share a lot of additional information related to this topic. So if you have time, please take a look at that too. Okay, I'll unshare now.
Do you see any questions, Mr. JP?
Yeah, I do. I do. I see comments as well that I'll share. A tip to share with everyone, because there's some individuals here that are, are working in this area as well. So, and most neurodiverse brains have weak executive function skills, just like you mentioned. Human brains have a negative bias naturally. Think see tiger, bad run, and tend to remember negative things. Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. ND kids get negative feedback all day long. You talk too much, you're slow, you're bad. So a tip, I'm just reading. Have the kid keep a journal of all their positive experiences. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. That's come up a lot too, as a good strategy, because of positive feedback, positive skills, when they did well. Yeah, yeah, there were, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Um, what they shined in, when they got a good grade, when they did something they feel good about. Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really good. That's so common as well. The only sort of, like, even though there has been good things, right? It's a constant sort of, no, those haven't happened or those don't exist. Yeah. So when they feel down, they can read the journal. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that's also attached to like one of these, I forget, it's that kid confidence book that I had at the beginning of the presentation. I had the specific, I'm forgetting the name, type of feedback. And there's a big emphasis in that book on when we give feedback, it's also about looking at, what were some things that were difficult before and that are able to be done successfully now, that can be forgotten, right? And this idea of this journal really helps with, pointing out these positive things, positive experiences. Um, mm, Thank you for sharing that. So when they feel down, they can read the journal. I see a comment here. Um, I think. Okay, I'll read the question. My son hasn't been formally diagnosed, but he shows signs of ADHD. Fortunately, he's been happily attending TIPS. Today, he woke up early on his own and rode his bicycle. I feel that his growing self-esteem is not only supporting his learning, but also contributing to a more positive attitude towards life. Are there universities that offer support similar to what TIPS provides? Okay, thank you very much for that question. And yes, again, not an expert, but my understanding is there are a few universities that do approach their university's philosophy with the approach of supporting students from all different types of learning backgrounds, with emphasizing that we understand how to support students who have learning differences and understand neurodiversity. One of them is called Beacon College. Beacon College. And I actually learned recently, which was interesting, they have a study abroad program in Tokyo. They don't have I mean, they have a study abroad campus, but the main campus is in the United States. The other one is Landmark College, is again one of these universities that has an understanding of neurodiversity. Um, Not many others are coming to mind, but I mean, there's again, my strongest area in this is the universities in the United States. When I was doing career counseling at the school. There's this big book full of universities that are more understanding of students with learning differences. Um, as far as the university in Japan, I'm not so sure which ones. Um, I see another comment here, but I hope that answers your question. Th Those are two that come to mind that I wrote in the chat for everyone: Beacon College and Landmark College. But I can't remember any other names. But there are many universities that have more stronger student support programs or very good student support programs. So that's probably something that you can search. But I'm only thinking about the United States right now. But I'm sure like now there's way more compared to when I did this 4 or 5 years ago. There's way more understanding and way more of the term neurodiversity and the importance of being able to support learners with learning differences because of course with the right support the success level is extremely high with the right support and due to all the this unique strengths as well, the incredible achievements, unique achievements that are also possible as a result of having the right support. um, there's a comment here in response to the question about universities. Most public colleges in the US have some kind of assistance. Yeah, yeah, a student support program. But I'll give an example. My example, I went to Boston University in the United States, and even though I had my two diagnoses, I didn't go once to the student support center of the university. And my first, and that's again my executive functioning skill challenges at the time. And the first semester at the university, I also didn't go to my academic advisor because I didn't even know one existed. And I signed up for a graduate level course, like 700 something, because it had a really interesting name for the course. I thought it was so cool. So I went, and the first part of the class, everyone was introducing themselves and what they're interested in, but also their grade level at the university. And the people who started were all saying, "Oh, I'm a master's, second year of my master's, studying this and this. I'm doing PhD." And then it came around to me, and I said, "Oh, I'm a first year undergraduate." And of course, it was very interesting for many of the people there to hear that. And then the professor asked me to stay after, and I spoke to the professor, and they said, I don't think that this course is the best course for you right now. 'Cause I didn't know about those things. I had real challenges my first semester, 2 semesters in university because, yeah, I simply had my executive functioning challenge specifically with organization. So I didn't know like when certain tests were happening. I didn't know when certain projects were due, and yeah, of course, in university, that's really, really difficult because they're massive classes and you're pulling all-nighters to try and finish something, but then oversleeping. So I was saying something really good I did was, especially later on in the years, was I sat in the front or near the front of the lectures, so the professor knew who I was. This was like a strategy I had myself, and so if something came up, if I made a mistake, they would actually know my face and know that I'm not someone just randomly appearing. Oh, can you help me with this? And that was a really good strategy, but I'm sure I would have done better, especially the first two semesters, had I known there was a support available, academic support available. So I highly recommend, yeah, a university with a good academic support program and reaching out to it. Um, but yeah, okay, I'll address one more. Oh, just someone sharing about link articles. So thank you for that. But that's all. Yeah, I guess since I